I'm Dr. Zaman Al-kafaf, one of the emergency physicians in the UK. I'm here to tell you a few things about the situation in Iraq and also about my story and how did I end up looking after and meeting thousands of you in the British hospitals. I came to the UK in 2008 on a student visa and I got my master's degree a year later. A year after that, I managed to pass my tests and got my license to work as a physician in the UK. And since then, I have been meeting many of you, and usually I would ask you for your story. And I'm here to tell you my story. And as it is not about me being a doctor, I'll put my stethoscope and badge aside. Born in the late 70s in Iraq, and when I was a couple of years old, the Iraqi-Iranian war started, and that lasted for 8 years, during which we were worried every time there is a knock on the door that somebody will take away my dad to join the forces. In 1990 and 1991, there were the Kuwait events, as many of you might know it as the Desert Storm, after which there was sanctions on Iraq. And even though these sanctions theoretically were aiming toward the regime at that time, but actually there were many civilian people who are killed as a result of lack of medicine and food, and that was throughout my high school. I went and graduated from medical school before the events of 2003. And many of you might remember what was said about weapons of mass destruction, which were eventually not found in Iraq. But what happened since 2003? Well, since 2003, studies have shown that more than 500,000 of Iraqi civilians lost their lives because of violence at that time. But it's not only Iraqis. There was more than 4,000 Americans killed. There was also more than 179 of British people lost their lives with the thought and idea of delivering a democratic Iraq, progressive Iraq, an Iraq that have human rights in it. 179 lives affected in the United Kingdom. 179 families with a mom or dad lost, with the hope a better Iraq is to come. But what happened since 2003? Well, since 2003, Iraqi government was controlled and led by many religious parties, clerics, and leaders. This has deepened the sectarial divisions in Iraq that affected which sector controlled which position, and there was a rise in sectarian violence, which is in its peak killed a lot of civilians just based on their identity. Religious parties that helped each other to affect the electoral system, which will make it very difficult for any new party to emerge, any new voice to come out, any new picture or opposition to come and say no. Religious parties that are strongly affected and influenced, and many believe they are controlled by hands staying outside the borders. And in here, fingers are being pointed toward Iran. Iran with an N rather than a Q. The Iranian influence in Iraq is so huge. That meant the dream of the Iraqi people, and with them the 179 British, of a new democratic Iraq is getting more and more difficult. So what is the Iraqi youth are doing? Well, currently there is an uprising, many protests going up in Iraq. People peacefully demanding for democracy. People peacefully demanding for human rights. People peacefully demanding to be heard. They are saying no to corruption. Iraq, instead of being a very rich country in matter of their oil reserve and oil exports, is one of the highest in corruption. And you can search these information on the internet. So these peaceful protesters are coming out and saying no, stop that. And what was the government approach? Was shush. Shush with two parts. Shoot them down and shut them down. Many governmental and non-governmental militia forces were killing the peaceful protesters. And later on, the official announcement said, well, there were unknown snipers and we could not catch them. But in addition to shoot The protesters, they were also shutting them down. The country became a black hole of internet. These peaceful protesters, they were struggling to get their image transferred, their voice heard by the external world. They could not get the support they needed. They could not get the appropriate treatment when they went to hospitals. Hospitals running out of supplies, and doctors are struggling there to cope with the amount of violence happening. Well, many of the offices for main news channels in Iraq got raided by unknown forces to stop the truth coming out. This is how a government is dealing with peaceful protests. There is a duty on every one of us is to be the voice for these peaceful protesters. There is a duty that we show that we care. You might ask me, what can I do? Well, you can do a lot. You can be the voice. You can go to the internet and find your political representative, whether an MP, a congressman, or whatever, and write to them. Show them that you do care. You care for the child who lost a dad during the protest. You care for the widow who lost a husband because of corruption in Iraq. You do care for the people who lost their life dreaming of a democratic, progressive Iraq. Spread the hashtag, save the Iraqi people. No shush. We rely on you. You can be a very important voice for innocent people. Thank you.